Hello, I am Dr. Ali Williams. I am currently in the math department at the London School of Economics in the UK, and I'm sorry I can't be with you this week in Bern, but hopefully from this short presentation you will get a gauge of what we looked at within this paper, and if you have any questions about the research, please feel free just to email me at the following email address, and hopefully I'll be able to see you at a conference very soon. So the title of today's talk and also the title of the paper is Target Setting, a case study looking at how greater collaboration can impact the effectiveness of target setting. And it's worth noting this is focused primarily on target setting within mathematics, but I think it would be particularly interesting to see how these techniques could be applied in a different discipline. So let's firstly kind of step back a little and say, what is the goal of the case study we undertook? So at a very high level, what we were interested in doing was testing the suggestion of Michael Hanifin, who in 1981 suggested that students who set their own learning goals attain more of the learning goals. And if you'd like to know more about that, here's the paper, which was published in the Journal of Educational Research back in 81. So in order for us to test this suggestion, we designed this case study, and the case study was focused on a student who was at a medium-sized sixth form college in the UK. For people who don't know, a sixth form college is a place where students between the ages of 16 and 19 generally go for further education, and in particular students when they finish at a sixth form college would either go into work or they would quite commonly go to university to conduct further education. So this specific student we worked with from the sixth form college was selected from their class via a simple random sampling process. The student selected was from a mixed attainment GCSE resit class and was generally quite low ability, and the overall case study was completed within a 4-week period. So when we first met with the student, we outlined what would be happening within these 4 weeks, and at that point the student was asked to write down a list of their goals, which we said could both be academic and non-academic. So the list they came up with was the following. So in particular, there were several key goals for the student. For example, they would like to go to university and get a good job, and in particular with respect to math, goals 8 and 9 are quite important, where they specifically said they would like to get better at both fractions and graphs. So when the student had completed this task, the student was asked to then do the following. So they were asked to do 3 things. Firstly, we asked them to create an academic learning based target based on the goals they listed, and they were to do this without discussing with their teacher. Secondly, they were asked to discuss with their teacher and collaboratively create an academic learning based target together. And thirdly, they were asked to simply just be given some learning target solely by their teacher. So kind of in summary, after this meeting, the student would be given 3 targets to work on, and they would work on this within the next 2 weeks before they met the teacher again, and then repeated the process one more time. And after each of these meetings, they would be given 1 target which they created, so the student created a target. They would also have a collaboratively created target through the discussion with their teacher, And thirdly, there would be a teacher-created target. And overviewing the results, if you'd like to know kind of more about these results, the kind of much greater analysis is completed in the paper, which I'll give you the reference to at the end of the talk. But let me just overview this table. So the leftmost column describes the different topics which the student was focused on. So firstly, the subjects were fractions, plotting graphs, using a new line throughout their work when appropriate, substitution, exchange rates, and using the equal sign. The second column outlines which target was set by who. So you can see that the first target was the student set target, the second was collaboratively set, the third was the teacher set, and then the same occurs beneath. The next column denotes the week the target was set in. So you can see the first 3 targets were set at the beginning of the first week, while the next 3 targets were set at the beginning of the 3rd week. And then the final 2 columns are quite interesting, and these columns are essentially asking if both the student and if the teacher believed that the student had actually met the target which was set. So in what you can see is for the first student set target in the first week, both the teacher and the student believe that the student had attained this target. The second row suggests that both the student and the teacher believed that the student attained the collaborative target, while for the third row something different happens, which is the target which was set by the teacher, neither the student nor the teacher believed that the target was attained in this case. And then something very similar happens below. So namely, for the first student set target in the second period, we see that both the student and the teacher believed the target was attained, and the collaborative target both were attained similarly. But then something a bit more interesting happens for the final teacher set target, which was that the student did not believe they attained the target, while in this case the teacher actually believed the student did attain the target. And this, as is discussed in the paper, is backing up some previous research which suggests that students often underestimate their progress, especially in the setting when the teacher has given them a goal to attain. As I said, if you want to know more about this table and also the results, please check out the paper. But just quickly, let's just say a couple of takeaways from this case study. So firstly, it's hoped that this case study provides some appreciation that giving students freedom and responsibility when creating their learning goals is a positive step. So in particular, what we can see from the table is that in both cases where the student was set targets by themselves and in collaboration with the teacher, so namely the targets in relation to fractions and plotting and the targets in relation to substitution and exchange rates, both the student and the teacher believed those targets were attained. So in the situation when the student had input, they attained all targets. However, that wasn't the case when the teacher simply set the target, as is shown in the new line and the equality-based targets. It's an important thing to note, however, that during this case study we only worked with one student, which essentially means that the time to formulate meaningful targets with students was not an issue for us. However, for teachers this may well be quite a big concern. So one suggestion we had was that perhaps one could implement a higher level of support earlier on in the academic year for students to kind of get the grips of setting their own targets before this support could be reduced over time. And it's always nice just to quickly talk about a bit of future research. So one thing which is a relatively obvious future research direction is that it would be very interesting to ask if similar conclusions could be drawn within a larger sample size, because here we focus primarily on just one student. Secondly, it would be interesting to see if similar or different conclusions would be drawn within a different setting. So when I say a different setting here, I'm talking about, would similar conclusions be drawn if this wasn't a mixed attainment GCSE research class and instead could be a, say, higher set 1 in a secondary school, perhaps? And thirdly, it would be interesting if we could formally quantify the difference that target setting had on student outcomes within this larger sample. Fourthly, it would be interesting to see if we can formally quantify how the previously mentioned level of support from teachers could vary with respect to time. So the second bullet point of the previous slide, when we say perhaps a high level of support could be offered early in the academic year and then reduced, this focus here would be perhaps the level of support could reduce linearly or logarithmically over time. And finally, it would be interesting to see if a similar case study could be conducted across different disciplines, not just within a mathematical context. And I think that's all I had to say. So as I said, if you have any questions, then feel free to email me via the following link, so a.e.williams1@lse.ac.uk. And if you'd be interested in knowing more about the case study, then please check out the paper and get in contact. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing any questions via email.